Hey everyone, it's Darren. Welcome. Today we're going to look at two of the mathematical logical functions. They're functions that do math, but only conditionally. And that's the SumIf and the AverageIf functions. Actually, there's two SumIf and two AverageIf functions. Uh, these are kind of the extension of the CountIf functions that we looked at in the last video. If you haven't already seen that, check out the link down in the description. The CountIf goes a little bit more into why you're doing this and how you do it if you kind of push a little past the limits, because it is pretty easy to get a little more complex than these functions can really handle. Then you have to kind of take matters into your own hands and do your own calculations to make sure everything works right. So we go a little bit more into how to do that in the CountIf video. Uh, anyway, what these do in basic terms, the SumIf function will add up numbers only if certain conditions are met. The AverageIf functions will average numbers only if certain conditions are met. And that can be a thing that's really useful. You can if you have your data and you're trying to say uh, find the average GPA for students who live in Texas, and you have a list of students and GPAs and states, you can do conditional for Texas and only average those. And the only other way to do it manually, well, the easier way to do it manually is to like sort them, copy out Texas to another sheet, and average them manually over there. Whereas these functions allow you to do that sort of thing automatically, which ends up being a lot easier. You can also do it with intermediate columns, and I've certainly done that. I'll show you how to do that actually over in the CountIf video. So let's take a look at the sum, SumIf and AverageIf functions. The data on here, if you weren't here before, if you haven't seen the CountIf video yet, column A is just the numbers 1 to 50. Div 2 is the modulo 2 of column A. So it's just the remainder of column A divided by 2. Uh, column C is divided by 3 modulo. So it's 0 if it's evenly divided by 2 or 3. And we're going to make use of that for our tests here. You can do any kind of test you want. It doesn't have to be that simple. Uh, but that's what I'm using here today. Okay, so let's do the SumIf, and I want to find the sum of the numbers in column A which are odd. And the way to do that is equals SumIf, and the parameters here can get confusing, so you have to pay attention a little bit. The range here, the range is the uh, criteria range for sum and average, both. So the criteria range in this case for odd numbers are going to be B2 to B51. And the criteria is 0. And that probably looks pretty familiar to you if you saw the CountIf video, because that is exactly what we typed in the CountIf video. But there is another parameter on here we need to add, which is the sum range. And in this case, that's A2, A51. And this tells us that totals out to 650. Let's take a look at what this is, because this is not entirely intuitive. So the first range here, the B2 to B51, that is the criteria range. That's the stuff we're testing. The 0 here is because I know I'm just looking for a 0. That's made it simple for this one. And the A2 to A51, that is the actual numbers that we need to average. So they could be the same numbers. It could be the same range, but it doesn't have to be. If it is the same range, you don't actually have to put it in that last time. It'll just assume it. Okay, a little bit more complex. We want to do the sum of all the numbers in column A which are greater than 15. So that is SumIf, and again, criteria range first. In this case, criteria range is actually um, A2 to A51 because we're having to check to see if those are greater than 15. And then criteria is quote greater than 15 quote. And you see the sum range is in square brackets. That means it's a optional parameter. We don't actually have to put that in there. And the sum is 1155. What about the sum of all the numbers that are less than 15? Uh, well, let's do that. So that's equals SumIf. Range again is A2, A51. Criteria is quote less than. I'm going to type it this way this time, and I'll tell you why here in a second. And 15. And like I said before, you can put this in. And if it's a different column, if it's a different range, you have to put it in. But I could put in A2 to A51 if I want. And that comes out to 105. Now let's look at the conditions here. So in this last one I put in, I did quote less than quote ampersand 15. But in the one above it, I did quote greater than 15 quote. And in both cases, what you're doing is you're using a text string as your parameter. Your parameter has to be a text string in the form of a text string. Uh, Here, obviously, the text string is just greater than 15. Here, you're taking less than, and then you have the 15 here, and the ampersand just takes two text strings and sticks them together. That's all that does. So that makes a less than 15. As it happens, this is actually, although it's a little bit more complex, it's the preferred method for doing it, and occasionally it'll matter. Um, Not always, but sometimes you'll type in something and it will actually matter. And if you are doing a cell reference, you always have to do that. In fact, let's go ahead and do a cell reference now. So I want to know what is the sum of all of the numbers in column A which do not equal the value in J2, J1, excuse me. So that equals SumIf, and that the range here, again, this is the criteria range, which is A2 to A51, and criteria is does not equal, and yeah, so we can break this up if we want. In this case, J10, J1. And since the sum range is the same as the criteria range, we don't have to type it. And I have 1265. So that's all the numbers 1 to 50 without including 10. Well, what if we want to do true criteria? What if I want to know the sum of the numbers in column A, which are evenly divisible by 2, and also at the same time evenly divisible by 3? Well, I can do that. So that's this is SumIfs with an S at the end this time. And this is where it tries to confuse you. You remember all the previous ones for SumIf, the criteria range comes first, and then the conditions, and then the sum range. And if they're the same, it doesn't matter. In this case, though, the sum range is first, and we'll show you why here in a second. So the sum range here is A2 to A51. And now criteria range number 1. Criteria range number 1 is the evenly divisible by 2, which we have conveniently located in column B. So that's B2 to B51. And if it's evenly divisible, that's going to be a 0. And now criteria range number 2. And this is where the ifs and the SumIfs are different from uh, the if and the SumIf. The SumIfs you can put multiple conditions on, and it ANDs them together. So criteria condition number 2 is going to be C2 to C51, and that would be 0. Okay, so we add those up, and there's 18 of them. We know from the CountIf video, the sum comes out to 216. Um, well, what if we want to do um, greater than 10 and less than 40? Well, we can do that. So we do equals SumIfs. Yeah, sum range again is A2, A51. Criteria range 1 is, in this case, A2 again to A51. Criteria 1 is, let's see, I want quote greater than 10, and criteria range 2 is A2, A51, and it's less than ampersand 40. See if I got that right. Looks good. 725. So you're seeing that things are getting a little more complicated here, and that happens. There's no way to get around it, and that's why I said these are really useful functions. But if you start to get into stuff that gets more in depth, this tends to get really ugly really quick. And then just use intermediate columns because it's more important that you're able to actually keep track of what's going on. And then if we come over here and we look at, I want evenly divisible by 2 or evenly divisible by 3. Um, that's actually a SumIf of, let's see, this is criteria range, so that would be B2 to B51. Criteria is 0, and sum range is A2 to A51. And then I add to that SumIf of C2, C51 for evenly divisible by 3. It would be a 0, and then A2 to A51 again. And if you remember over here on the CountIf, remember we had to subtract out a number, and that's because 6, for example, is evenly divisible by 2 and evenly divisible by 3. So we have to subtract out the 1 for each of the cases where it's both, and we already had that number up here, which is 216. So then we will subtract out, what's that, G6. Okay. So that's SumIf. Uh, does it make any sense with text? You may wonder. Well, you can't really add 1, 2, 3, and 7 and have it make much sense. It'll work. It'll just give you a string that says 1, 2, 3, 7. But where it does make sense is you can actually count how many records or add how many records um, meet a certain criteria. If you have lines for, 1 blue car, 3 red cars, 7 purple cars, 2 red cars, and you want to find out how many red cars do you have, you can do that. And it works just the same way as the other stuff. So it's SumIf uh, criteria range. Criteria is B2 to B51. And criteria, let's use our criteria is C2. I'm looking for criteria is 5. And then the sum range, in this case, because we're doing text, we pretty much have to put a sum range in. So that's A2 to A51. And if you add up all of the line numbers there that correspond, that have the word 5 on them, uh, which is, 5, 15, 25, 35, 45, and well, it's 45, I don't have 55, you'll get 125. So that does make sense. Okay, now average if, as you could probably guess, tends to work pretty much the same way. If we go to equals average if, so when I get the average of the odd numbers, we have the criteria range, so that's going to be B2, B51, and then the criteria is going to be 0, it's going to be 1 because it's odd numbers, and the average range is A2 to A51, and you get average 25. Um, so these all work kind of the same way. You just go through and do the average just the way you did the sums. The parameters are exactly the same. And the text actually works exactly the same also. And you also have the average if. You have the average ifs down here if you need to add them together. It gets me even messier when you have to do an average, though, of an or. And this one, I don't know that there's any way to actually make it work because what you'd be doing is you'd be doing equals average if of criteria range is going to be B2, B51, and that equals 0, and average range is A2, A51, plus average if of C2, C51, evenly divisible by 3, and then A2, A51. And the problem here is that you've averaged the first number, you've averaged the numbers that are evenly divisible by 2, you've averaged the numbers that are evenly divisible by 3, and you came up with 51.5 when you add those together. The problem is you can't really add those together and just have that be your average. And the reason is that your average is going to certainly be less than 50. Your maximum number here is 50. So your average can't be 51. And even subtracting out this number like we did, but that doesn't even make sense. Uh, so this ends up being one of those where it's really more complex than this function can handle. So if you wanted to do something like averaging the numbers that are evenly divisible by 2 and the numbers that are evenly divisible by 3, what you need to do is set up the temporary column like we talked about over in the CountIf function, and do a column if it's 1, do a column if it's evenly divisible by 2, evenly divisible by 3, multiply stuff across so that you only get it once and then average the numbers. And again, it starts to get complex, and that's just the beginning. Things can get really complex. Uh, I'll do a video up here sometime in the future about how to use temporary columns or intermediate columns and even intermediate sheets, which I often find are necessary when your data starts to get really messy. But that's video for another day. So that's all I have for you for SumIf, SumIfs, AverageIf, AverageIfs. Uh, if you learned anything from the video, and hopefully you did, if you learned anything, be sure to hit the like button. Also, subscribe and hit notify so you can see when new videos come out. If you want to check out the videos on ifs, switch, and choose statements, that's linked down in the description, as well as the CountIfs video is also linked down in the description. Uh, Again, I hope you learned something. I hope you're enjoying these videos. I also have a Patreon page. It's patreon.com/data analysis excellence. If you can help out there, that'd be great. I have a link down in the description for that also. And I'll see you next time.